Welcome back to KiayannePepper Commentary, where we discuss everything happening in the NFL world. Week 3 was an absolutely wild week, so let's just jump into our game recaps. Starting with Thursday Night Football, and this one went about as we expected. The Bills show off an absolute masterclass on offense against a struggling Miami defense to propel themselves to 3-0. Josh Allen goes 22 for 28 with 213 yards in the air on top of 3 touchdowns, with James Cook adding on the Bills' 4th and final touchdown with his 108 yards rushing. This game was closer than it should have been for the Bills, but they'll get a chance to stay hot next week against a struggling Saints team. For the Dolphins, what was a promising offensive showing for a majority of this game crashes and burns in the final moments in true Dolphin fashion. Tua throws his sole pick of the game, marking his 4th on the season in the final moments when Miami needed him to be clutch. Young running back Ollie Gordon looks promising in the backfield, taking one of Miami's 3 scores, but with the turnover problem and lack of a defense, Miami needs to make some changes, and I have a strong feeling it's going to come in the form of Mike McDaniel leaving. The opposite of that expected outcome, though, is the Browns taking down the Packers at home. The Packers, who had received so much praise, including from me, being touted as one of, if not the best team in the league, goes out and has a punt-off with the Cleveland Browns. The game doesn't see its first touchdown until the third quarter, which puts the Packers ahead by 10 points, but in the last 4 minutes of the game, the Browns just activate. Joe Flacco marches them downfield for a field goal, followed by an interception from the defense, which sets up a Quinshon Judkins touchdown. Then, when all hope seems lost, the special teams blocks a field goal, and the Browns nail their own, giving them the win 13-10. I think this is a true testament to how good the Browns' defense truly is. Myles Garrett continues to earn that paycheck every week he plays, starring as the true shining light of this team. They shut down the Green Bay run game as well, and tally 5 sacks for the day. Lots to work on next week for the Packers, but a massive morale boost in Cleveland. If only they could figure it out on offense. Indiana Jones is the truth. I know that it's just the Titans and that Jonathan Taylor's on pace to have his best season since 2021, maybe even better, but with how terrible this team was last year and how dominant they've been offensively, it was clear all they needed was a decent enough quarterback to push them over the hump. On the topic of Jonathan Taylor, he absolutely ran over this Titans defense, racking up his first 3 touchdowns of the year and 102 yards on the ground. Like I said last week, I still feel sorry for Cam Ward. He makes his first real major mistake of the season with a pick 6 on the opening drive, but I still don't blame him. I tried to throw to a covered check down too if it meant maybe I'm not the one getting hit for a play. Solid win for the Colts, and we'll see if they keep it up with a tough Rams team next week. So it turns out Jake Browning could not, in fact, keep the ship afloat while Cincinnati awaited their savior Joe Burrow's return. The backup quarterback throws 2 interceptions, which is not aided by his team losing 3 fumbles. Kevin O'Connell moves to 15-3 when he's starting a ginger at quarterback. Thank you, ESPN, for these kinds of stats, as Minnesota rips the Bengals a new one. Jordan Mason, averaging 7.3 yards a carry on 16 carries, is able to run 2 touchdowns in on top of backup Carson Wentz's 2 touchdowns through the air. This game was very obviously won by the Vikings defense, though, with 5 turnovers, as Minnesota was able to put up 48 points on just 371 yards of offense. I normally try to give bright spots for both teams, but Cincinnati's only touchdown was aided by penalties, and Jake Brown even lost a fumble on the drive that was recovered. Hopefully this was just a fluke week, but maybe Minnesota needs to look into starting Wentz over McCarthy full-time. And Mike 9-8 Tomlin is back on top. This game stays with the theme of why the hell are we turning the ball over so much, as New England loses 4 fumbles on top of a Drake May interception. I really want to like this Patriots team, and I think they have enough tools, but when you're turning the ball over as much as they did this week, you have no shot of winning, no matter how terrible the opposing offense is. Speaking of terrible, the Pittsburgh Towels get gifted a win this week. Last I checked, you usually need more than 203 yards of offense to win a football game, but I guess when your front 7 can make opposing players want to cry, you can do anything you want. Both teams need to show a lot of improvement if they want to attempt to make a push in the playoffs this year. That's mostly addressed to the turnover-ridden Patriots, since we already know where the end outcome of the Steelers season is. Rams. You come into this game with everything to prove. Get revenge from last season, show that you're a true Super Bowl contender, and continue on this season undefeated. The first half is making the game out to be an absolute blowout, showing true and utter domination, going up 19-7 and holding Jalen Hurts to -1 passing yards. Come the beginning of the third quarter, and things stay promising with a fumble that turns around and gives them another 7. and then the downfall begins. The Eagles score on 2 consecutive drives while Los Angeles remains stagnant with a punt followed by a turnover on downs. Philadelphia gives them the ball back by also turning it over on downs, but the Eagles get a 1-in-a-million play by blocking a field goal. The Eagles score but fail the 2-point, putting them ahead by 1, but when you have one of the best quarterbacks in the league when it comes to fourth quarter comebacks in Matthew Stafford, it should be no problem. LA drives down the field into field goal range and set up with 3 seconds to go. Philadelphia has already wasted their field goal luck, so surely nothing can go wrong, right? And another blocked field goal gets taken back for a touchdown. I'm convinced Philadelphia has a spell placed on Sean McVay to make him incapable of beating the Eagles. This is 100% going to be a playoff matchup this year, which I'm excited to see, but the Rams have got to learn how to play more than one half of good football if they want to go to the distance this year. I feel like this game is just the Rams-Eagles game, but if the Rams were able to hit the final kick. The game is mostly dominated by the Buccaneers until a pair of back-to-back touchdowns late for New York makes it a 20-26 game. Tampa Bay attempts a field goal to push the lead to 9, but it's blocked and taken back, putting the Jets ahead by 1 point. However, one of the best quarterbacks in the league in fourth quarter comebacks in Baker Mayfield drives downfield and puts the Buccaneers in field goal range. Where the game's branch is the Buccaneers' special teams actually learn from their mistake and drill the kick, moving them up to 3-0. I'll say the same thing for Tampa that I did about LA. This roster has the talent to go all the way. You just have to keep it together enough not to blow 17-point leads in the fourth quarter. Mike Evans going down is a hard blow, but he does this every year and still manages 1,000 yards, so I wouldn't be too worried. The week of the backup quarterbacks continues with Marcus Mariota having a field day with the Raiders defense. Former Heisman went 15 for 21 for 207 yards and a touchdown, but was also aided heavily by the Commanders' running game. You would think they would be hindered by the loss of Austin Eckler, but Washington still ran for 201 yards, boosted heavily by a 60-yard run from Jeremy McNichols. Las Vegas didn't have a bad game offensively, with Geno Smith bouncing back from an atrocious game last week by throwing for 3 touchdowns and no interceptions, but the Raiders' defense just could not make a stop. The Commanders were able to secure 4 touchdowns on offense as well as getting 1 more on special teams with a punt return. Vegas has a lot of work on defensively if they're struggling to stop a mostly backup-centered offense, so we'll see how much worse that gets as the season progresses. And the battle of who is the better inconsistent AFC South team, Jacksonville is able to secure the victory. Houston's defense once again plays a phenomenal game, but when your offense just refuses to move the ball, they can only hold out for so long. This game consisted of 12 punts, 2 missed field goals, 1 per team, and 4 turnovers, all of which came in the fourth quarter. It's so rare to get a game these days where it feels like both teams are trying to lose, but I honestly just think that these are 2 really good defenses. The Jaguars have forced 9 turnovers in 3 games on the season, and both teams are top 5 in points allowed per game with 17. This is still obviously not a game you want offensively, especially with Houston falling to 0-3, but it never hurts to see a good defensive scrap. Speaking of defense, what an absolute performance by Carolina at home. Forcing 3 turnovers and holding Atlanta scoreless is a feat you don't see too often. They didn't move the ball too much on offense, but I think that was largely due to consistently good field position throughout the game. Bryce Young continues trying to prove why he was the number 1 overall pick over CJ Stroud, which is honestly becoming easier by the day. And Chuba Hubbard has a solid performance on the ground. The real story of this game, though, is how Michael Penix absolutely fell apart. He had more passing yards than Young, but went 18 for 36 on top of 2 interceptions and was benched during the game for Kirk Cousins. The reason my fantasy app said was just bad. Bijan has a good day on the ground, but with the lack of quarterback play, there was nothing that could be done to change the outcome of this game. I'm going to feel bad for Justin Herbert's arm over the next week. The poor guy had 47 pass attempts and missed on almost 20 of them. You may say, oh, well, they must not have run the ball very much then. But oh no. The team also had 28 rush attempts. I guess that's just what happens when you average over 3 minutes per drive. Chargers sneak by in a divisional win thanks to a little help from Charger legend Keenan Allen deciding he is, in fact, allowed to catch the ball. A solid game all around for both teams, as is to be expected with some of these AFC West matchups. The Broncos just lost when it mattered. A 3-and-out on the drive after the other team just tied the game, giving them time to get in field goal range on top of the game's momentum, is just something they couldn't afford. Solid win from LA makes them 3-0 for the first time since LaDainian Tomlinson was a Charger in 2002. For the third week in a row, the Saints play an NFC West team, and for the third week in a row, the Saints lose to an NFC West team. Seattle came out in the first half, meaning absolute business, scoring 4 touchdowns on top of a blocked punt, also taken back for a touchdown. Sam Darnold performs how he did back in Minnesota with only 4 incompletions on the day, with the Seahawks winning by so much that even Drew Lock got to play in this game. Kenneth Walker has a below-average day on the ground, but still tallies 2 touchdowns of his own. As is the trend this week, this game was mostly won by the Seahawks defense, holding New Orleans to just 13 points as well as grabbing an interception. This was the most dominant win over the Saints by an NFC West team, but we'll see if they can overcome the Cardinals after already dropping a divisional game to San Francisco. This game contained not one, but 2 of the main trends over the week so far. For one, a backup quarterback came in and performed fairly decently. Mac Jones went 27 for 41 with 284 yards through the air. He threw for the 49ers' only touchdown, but was also the reason for San Francisco's only turnover. The second main trend this game followed was the stellar defense played by both teams. No touchdowns were scored the entire game until the mid-fourth quarter, and even then, those weren't the deciding factors since each team got one. The deciding factor also wasn't Arizona's defense forcing an interception that their offense did nothing with, or getting a safety to put Arizona ahead that their offense also did nothing with. Nope, came down to a 49er field goal to give the 49ers the game. After this week, the NFC West is now 6-1 against opposing divisions, with the Rams' botched win being their only loss outside the division. Something to keep an eye on in coming weeks. The Bears are confusing me so much. A terrible performance week 1, followed by an even worse performance week 2, just to go out and dominate in week 3. I can't tell if this was just an outlier game for their offense, or the Cowboys' defense is just that bad. They did give up 37 points to the Giants last week, and I know we haven't talked about them yet, but they looked terrible this week. Caleb Williams looks like Superman out there, throwing for 4 touchdowns and 298 yards. I can't even say he was carried by his running game because DeAndre Swift only had 33 yards on the ground. This is no discredit to the Bears' defense, however, as they consistently set up Bears with great field possession with a forced fumble and 3 interceptions. A dominant game from Chicago all around, but I think overall just a confusing week for the NFC North. The Chiefs finally put themselves into the win column, but of course no one will take it seriously since they beat the Giants. Russell Wilson's sole strategy of throw it deep to neighbors and praying failed him terribly this week as he went 18 for 32 with 160 yards and no touchdowns. The vet also threw 2 interceptions in the second quarter and played so badly that the Giants have made the decision to start Jackson Dart next week. The human bowling ball Cam Skattebo remains New York's shining light with 60 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Nothing about the Chiefs really stands out as they had a very average game overall, but when you're playing the New York Giants, an average game is all you need. 306 total yards and 2 touchdowns with some field goal help is all they need to get over the hump. They host the Ravens next week in what will be a real game to prove if Andy Reid's squad still has some fire in them. In what is easily the game of the week, Detroit continues to prove how Ben Johnson was not the reason for their success. This game was an offensive masterclass, but in 2 entirely different ways. The Lions' running game absolutely destroyed this Ravens defense, with the running back duo combining for 218 yards and 4 touchdowns. On the flip side, Lamar Jackson was doing what he could to gash the Lions' secondary with 3 passing touchdowns. He got some help from Derrick Henry, except for when it mattered, of course, with the star running back losing his 3rd fumble of the year. That leads me into how, despite allowing 30 points, the Lions' defense still performed great. 7 sacks and a crucial fumble recovery pushes Detroit to a huge victory. The Ravens lose their second close game to a top-tier team this year for a very similar reason. Derrick Henry has to work on the fumbling problem if the Ravens want to win in these close games. This has by far been the strangest week of football, and it shines through in my predictions. I went 11-5 with my preseason predictions, which is really funny because I guessed I was going to do that last week. 10-6 in next week's games, we'll have to see. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.